What is going on, everybody? I actually wanted to film a few snapshots of some YouTube videos I came across. There's a lot of people in the space that are talking about vegans sort of switching, dropping like flies, switching over because they're getting sick. And I'm not shooting this film to bash on veganism. I think that certainly there are some tremendous benefits to going on a vegan diet for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from a standard American diet and you're just not getting the nutrition you need. But I think we can take some examples from some of these people and we can see that for many people, the diet is not sustainable, it's not healthy. We'll see anecdotal feedback directly from some of these people where they've had brain fog from lack of omega-3 fatty acids, high quality DHA, EPA. They've had SIBO, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth from just the sheer amount of fiber and plants, is probably plant toxicity that they're putting in their body. And my goal with this video is really just to kind of take you through some examples of where eating a heavy plant diet without these rich, nutritionally dense, unique animal foods is going to cause major problems. And the idea that I'm supporting factory farming or that the carnivore movement is really promoting these unhealthy, unsustainable things is ridiculous. Like, we're not here promoting that. And if we look at the studies, the vegan, I don't want to say the vegan community because it's probably less the vegan community and more just people who've been misled or misinformed and have become sort of deeply ingrained in those sort of beliefs. But overall, there is this sort of like cult-like thing going on where if you eat animal foods, you are immediately supporting factory farming, you're destroying the earth, the planet. You can eat 1 to 2 cows an entire year and you're sustained. And we know, we've seen from some of the research done by great farms like White Oak Pastures that they can actually make a net negative carbon footprint on the planet through their sustainable practices. And so to say that, you know, eating a meat-based diet, an animal foods-based diet is destroying the planet is kind of unfounded and unsupported at this point. There's not evidence to really support that. And from a health perspective, there was just a post in the New York Times about how scientists may be wrong about red meat actually making people sick. And I mean, here's the bottom line. If you are a carnivore and you feel great and you're doing blood work and working with a professional, I think it's safe to say you can go on that path and continue down that path. I personally have worked with Carnivore MD. He's a good friend of mine. We worked together before he even became Carnivore MD. And I did blood work. I saw mental clarity clear up. I saw a lot of gut issues clear up. So we're gonna dive right into this. I know the video is titled about vegans dropping like flies, and I wanna get into this. There's 2 main vegans that I'm gonna jump into my laptop here and kind of shoot off and show a few clips from. The first is, she wasn't actually technically a vegan. She's always been about alignment. And what's interesting about Elise is I met her in this building in my old apartment here in Austin when she was here for Paleo FX. And actually Paul Saladino was here with her. We had I think we had some raw liver at the time and some fat trimmings. And she had just come out with her video about the fact that she is not a vegan. And the video is actually titled, I Am Not Vegan. And in the video, she goes on to discuss several points, which we're gonna jump to that I've highlighted. And again, I take it in context. I am a carnivore. I am supporting this movement. I really believe in the way that this eating and how it's helping people. Don't take every note that I take from the video and just chalk it up as the whole story. I've picked main points, both these videos in my experience, both Elise Parker's and Bonnie Rebecca's, which we're going to talk about. It's a very fascinating story of someone who pushed their bodies to stay vegan for several years, nearly a half decade, and saw several doctors and struggled to maintain an all plant-based diet. And just, we'll go through a lot of the examples there. These are anecdotal feedback. They're not proven data sets. But again, we see in the community across the board, a lot of people who have been sick, when they switch to an all animal-based diet, they get clear. They remove the toxins. They remove a lot of the lack of nutrients that they don't have, the They don't need the fiber for digestive purposes. In fact, their digestion improves when they're not on fiber. They don't have as much brain fog because they get the fatty acids that they need. They're getting a lot less omega-6 in their diet because the plant molecules and the plant fats aren't coming in at as much of a volume. And because they're eating ideally a grass-fed diet of animal foods, they're getting a much better balance of omega-3, which is pro-anti-inflammatory. So without further ado, let's jump into the Elise video. I'll show you some clips, and then we will go into Bonnie Rebecca's and we'll talk about her story as well. So this first section, I went from literally suffering to thriving. I thought that was just like such a powerful statement and worth mentioning. Obviously, not everybody's gonna do that, but for me personally, I've seen a lot of improvements. I think it can be really powerful to a lot of people.
I literally went from suffering to thriving. How's it going, friends? It's Elise here, and it has been a hot second since I have shared a video here on YouTube. I think it's been over a month or something, which has been the longest that I haven't shared a video.
So in this section, Elise talks about a lot in the video about just her experience with toxic mold, how she got sick from being exposed to that. If you read Headstrong by Dave Asprey, you also probably saw that too. What's interesting is she went from pretty much all plants, being a vegan, to adding in salmon. And literally the next day, she woke up and she's like, what the heck? What happened?
And I woke up the next morning with zero congestion and zero brain fog, zero migraine, zero lack of clarity. I felt the best that I had in probably like 3 years. I didn't have strong faith in this. I was just like trying something, kind of like a last resort type of thing. So yeah, I was kind of confused, like how the heck? And as I've continued to learn over the past few months of like what specifically it was, like how did this happen, why this happened, etc., to my understanding from what I have learned is that salmon is extremely high in omega-3s, but more specifically EPA and DHA, and these are essential.
It makes a lot of sense. Like if you eat salmon, you're gonna be getting a lot of DHA and EPA, fatty acids for your brain. And when you eat plant molecules and plant products, not only are you getting like phytic acid, oxalates, other things that can really mess with your gut and your body, but the equivalent form of plant sort of DHA, EPA is ALA. And most people, kind of as you see Elise mention here, aren't going to convert ALA very well. You can't even use ALA. You have to actually convert it to DHA or EPA. It's just, in studies, they find that maybe about a quarter, if you're a healthy adult, very well reporting in terms of recording, can you actually get it to that level? But for the most part, you're just not getting the fatty acids you need in your brain, and it's affecting your mental clarity.
And I want to share the main benefits that I have experienced. So it's been around 2.5, almost 3 months now that I have been not vegan anymore, that I've been consuming meat and fish and eggs and intermittent fasting as well. Some of the benefits that I have experienced, the number one, as I've shared so many times, is the brain. Like, I cannot explain how myself I feel. And it has been a long fucking time, you guys. I feel clear, mentally clear. I can focus, like I feel connected. I can articulate myself. I can communicate without stumbling and feeling lost and zombie-like and like I'm living in this fog. That was the main one for me, is like gaining myself back, gaining my like coherency. Is that a word?
So again, touching on the subject of feeling more like herself when she ate meat, fish, and eggs. Just again, you're getting fat, you're getting cholesterol, dietary cholesterol from the same biochemical operating system as a human, right? Animals are a lot more like we are than plants. Plants don't even make cholesterol. They have cholestanol, they have other desmosterol, they have other molecules that are equivalent to cholesterol, but we can't even use them. They have beta carotene instead of pure retinol form vitamin A. They have, and so your body, when you take in these foods, it has to actually convert a lot of them into a bioavailable form for your body to process them.
Another massive change, a massive benefit for me has been that I have a sex drive now. I literally have never had a sex drive in my life. Some of you might recall a video that I shared a few months back, something titled 12 Things You Didn't Know About Me, and one of them was that I really resonate with the term or label gray asexual, which essentially means that in order to feel sexually aroused, I need to have a deep, intimate, emotional connection with someone. And I need that, otherwise I literally cannot feel aroused. And I resonated deeply with that because that's how I have always felt, especially in the last 4 to 5 years of my life, like very, 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 very low sex drive. And guys, my sex drive is unreal. And to me, that is an indicator that my hormones are not all over the place, but I actually have some sort of healthy hormone balance. And I have yet to get blood work done after making this dietary change for the last few months, but I will be soon.
I thought this was great. She talks about her sex drive, and actually in Elise's channel, there is a video about her saying she identified as, I think it was called a gray asexual. Now, I don't personally know much about that, and I'm not gonna speak to her claims, but I will say, personally, I have noticed since being a carnivore, my sex drive has gone up. I've also seen my testosterone. If you wanna see that video, I have a video about how I tripled my testosterone. My testosterone has gone up. It probably has to do with the higher dietary cholesterol, which is a precursor for the anabolic hormone, testosterone, which is certainly linked to your libido if you're a man, probably as well for women. Progesterone, these anabolic hormones that help you build up muscle, build up strength, and drive you are built off of these cholesterol molecules in your body. So don't believe the hype about lowering cholesterol, having low cholesterol in your body. Cholesterol is in every cell membrane. It's critical to your body's health, to your function, to your hormone production. I'm guessing she probably started adding a lot more cholesterol and fat, and it was in such a bioavailable form that her body was like, awesome, let me make these hormones, and boom, she saw her sex drive just kick in. And I would argue that reproductive health, sex drive, is one of the most powerful indicators of your overall vitality and health. If you have a strong sex drive, if you feel like your libido is kicking and you're feeling good there, it's a good indicator. And it makes kind of sense, right? From a natural selection, reproductive sense, if we can thrive and reproduce, we're a healthy species. If our reproductive triggers aren't really kicking into high gear, then we're probably more in survival mode and we're more in regulatory mode and trying to get through things rather than thriving. So it's really cool to see her say that and to experience that. I personally can affirm as well that I've seen that as well.
Really been interested in sharing too much about it, and that was before I knew that any of these changes were gonna take place. I just kind of have been more interested in like mindset transformation and self-growth and yeah, just other stuff. I also feel like my skin has been more hydrated and more like tight feeling. I kind of felt like it was starting to like wrinkle and not look so hot. But it just feels more hydrated and more like elastic. And what other benefits? Muscle gain and fat loss has been like unreal. My body changed like so quickly and so rapidly, and I was working out less consistent and less hard. So that was interesting. Yeah, those are the main benefits. But to me, like if I could have just got my brain back, I would have been 100% stoked on that, but there have been various other benefits that I've received since then. Sex drive is like literally life-changing. So I want to make it very, very loud and clear that I am still learning, that this is just my personal experience and I am not a professional and I am not telling you how to live, how to eat, how to be. I'm just sharing my journey.
In this kind of last section I wanted to outline, she talked about how her skin looked so much clearer. I can personally attest just how clear my skin has gotten since being on the carnivore diet. I don't get any break, like maybe one blemish here and there, usually from cheating when I might go out and have barbecue and there's a little bit of spice or sauces on there. Lately, I've been experimenting a little bit with like some tequila soda or whiskey and soda, and so the alcohol may have a little bit of a trigger every now and then when I go out and if I have a cocktail. But by and large, skin composition really cleared up. I can personally attest to that. If anything, you know, the removal of dairy for me really had a big trigger on the skin, but it's cool to see that she also noticed that as well. And I've seen this on vegans. You're gonna see this in the Bonnie Rebecca video. Her boyfriend, Tim, his skin was just horrendous. Like the skin in many respects is sort of like a reflection of how your body is living. And so if you have a lot of blemishes on your skin, you're probably dealing with some things on autoimmune side internally, or you're dealing with some things that you're just not agreeing with, and it might be worth looking further into that. She mentioned her muscle gain was really easy, fat loss was easy, the body composition changed very rapidly, and all these make sense because you're giving your body the hormones they need to build muscle. You're in a better balanced state metabolically from what we can see in terms of how the animal foods are supporting a human animal's body, biochemically being so much similar, not having these plant toxins, not having these chemicals that you're in a better balanced state metabolically from what we can see in terms of how the animal foods are supporting a human animal's body, biochemically being so much similar, not having these plant toxins, not having these chemicals that cannot initially provide you with nutrition. And so it's really interesting to see all that. So Bonnie Rebecca's story is pretty fascinating. She was a hardcore vegan, and she put out a video about 10 months ago, January 14th, 2019. And she lives in Sydney, Australia. The video is really fascinating. It's about 35, 40 minutes. If you're in the carnivore space and you wanna hear more about what it's like to be a vegan and maybe have it not go so well, this is a pretty fascinating anecdotal story.
So here it goes. I'm not vegan anymore. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, I was vegan for just over 5 years. And it was kind of everything to me. It was my whole life, my whole identity. It was the motivation behind my YouTube channel. It was just my whole world. It was something I believed so strong down to my core.
We're not going to go through all the video, but there was a lot to kind of unpack, and I wanted to dive into it. So starting out, really her story, she was a devout vegan. It was her whole life. It was kind of her religion, and it was really heartbreaking for her to accept that she was not vegan. And I get it, like we're all tied to our beliefs. We're all tied to kind of what we think, and maybe I'll be wrong one day and the carnivore diet won't be the right thing. And I hope I'll have an open enough mind to be proven wrong and to learn more and to be educated. And maybe even I'll experiment with plants. But for now, I have found that I feel the best on this, and the blood work seems to be supporting that this path is a good path for my body and how I'm reacting to the whole sort of diet. She goes in to talk about how she was a vegan, she was devout, how difficult it was to sort of admit to not being a vegan anymore. And I think that takes a lot of courage, and I really want to applaud her for that. She talks about how she had to make some major changes early on in her life getting into veganism, and how veganism was a great step for her.
Interested because prior to going vegan, my health was not great. I would try and eat healthy, but I would always fail, and then I would feel like a failure, and then I would binge out on food. Anyway, just had a bad relationship with food. I've talked about this lots in the past. And just to give you guys context, I had a few health problems like skin. My skin was never great. I had a lot of rosacea and just like discoloration in my skin, as well as breakouts. I had chronic sinus issues, so my sinuses were like blocked all the time. Like I would have to, like I could never breathe out of my nose. And I had really bad digestion in general. I was constantly constipated. Like I just never really went to the toilet. And when I did, my bowel movements were not great. So that's like kind of like a summary of my pre-vegan health, I guess you could say.
This is something I mentioned earlier. I think as someone who's just eating the standard American diet where you're not really regulating what you do eat, and you're eating a lot of fast food, maybe junk food, fried food, you're just not really eating a a clear diet that's well established and you're introducing a lot of different things, it can be a challenge and you can have health issues with that. So I think it can be a positive step to eliminating all these standard American triggers that you have, but at the same time, you need to be mindful that long term, it may not be the right step for you, and you may have to graduate from that to something else like the carnivore diet.
To that, and I just felt so good being able to eat like large meals, and everything was really good. We were eating a lot of smoothies for breakfast and lunch, and then having like big high carb dinners, you know, lots of rice, potatoes, that kind of thing. And yeah, a few months into that, Tim started to notice that his skin was breaking out. And I also did notice this too, but I didn't really think much of it because my skin was never great. So I just kind of was like, whatever. Like, I noticed that a lot of my rosacea had cleared up, but I started getting pimples in new areas, like in particular around my cheeks. I would get really big pimples there, and I was like, that's weird, but my skin's cleared up in other places and my sinus is so much better and I feel so much better. So there's all these positives. I didn't really focus on the negatives. But Tim's skin was really weird because he had never had acne in his life. We kind of just brushed it off and thought that it was detox because that was kind of a word used a lot in that community. And we were like, oh, maybe it's the oil or like the fats when we eat out. So we stopped eating out, we cut out all fats, all oils, and we were like, yeah, this is totally gonna make it all go away. However, it didn't, it only got worse.
Going further along, they decided it got to a point where they wanted to see a skin specialist. And they went and found a skin specialist who also focused on digestive systems. This doctor said, hey, you're probably dealing with SIBO, that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And when that happens, you got a lot of issues. You're gonna have a lot of pain. You're not gonna be feeling good. You could be having, like they're saying here, different sort of parasites potentially within your gut, pain within your gut. And this doctor put him on rounds of antibiotics, which helped, but he was still eating the vegan diet, which was fueling a lot of these plant issues that were caused within his leak, which probably what he was experiencing was like a leaky gut.
Things started to get really bad. All of Tim's symptoms were like 10 times worse than they were before he took the antibiotics, but he got a whole lot of other things going on as well, including insomnia, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, serious pain, gas and bloating every time he ate a meal. We were really lost and we didn't know what to do at this point because I was feeling like whatever Tim had going on, I had like a very small degree of it going on. I still feel like I'd come so far from what I was before I went vegan that I was never questioning the vegan diet because I was like, this has only helped me. And we tried going to a handful of like natural doctors, naturopaths, other medical doctors, Ayurvedic doctors, nutritionists and dietitians. And a lot of them said, you need to change your diet. And as soon as they said that, we were like, okay, bye. Obviously you don't know what you're talking about.
So they talked to more doctors and they started saying, you gotta change your diet. But being the devout vegans that they were, they didn't want to change their diet. They wanted to stay on the path and they just wouldn't want to listen to them. But the overall consensus was that, hey, you've got some parasites in your gut, you've got inflammation in the gut, you need to shift out of this plant-based diet and add in some animal foods and lower the inflammation, lower what's going on in this environment. So he moved on. They're still eating a full vegan diet, testing, they're getting supplements, herbs, and it sounds like, about 16 minutes into the video,
pay closer attention. And I think also as time went on, I just became more aware of my body because I was learning more about health and things like that. It wasn't like things were really bad and I wasn't telling you guys or anything. It was just that gradual process for me learning about myself. And with Tim, the reason I never talked about that is because I was just confused and I always thought that it was an underlying problem and it wasn't the diet's fault. I didn't want to like make veganism look bad essentially because I didn't think it was veganism's fault. I also started taking like primrose oil and flaxseed oil and eating a lot more fats, and I found that really helped with my skin, especially the dryness of my skin. I didn't ever realize like how dry my skin was. So after a few months of seeing this naturopath, I was feeling pretty good because I had seen some changes. Tim, on the other hand, was feeling worse than ever because he really had a lot of hope in this naturopath doctor and he wasn't helping Tim at all.
They're just getting so frustrated, so stressed out about the whole situation because they're doing all these things, they're paying all this money for these doctors, still on the vegan diet and clearly still experiencing these symptoms of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, probably leaky gut, probably some histamine intolerance just boiling up over all the inflammation that's going on in their body. They went and saw another specialist about 20 minutes in.
We'd exhausted every avenue. We'd spent so much money on tests and supplements and we had no answers. Our naturopath kept telling us to be patient, but the next time we saw him, we were like, this is not working. Like, we need something else. Is there anything else you can do? And he said, okay, well, I have a dietitian next door that I work with and she could run an allergen test on you to see maybe there's some foods that, you know, you're eating that are making this worse. So we both got allergen tests done and it came back with, well, mine wasn't as bad as Tim's. Mine was probably like 10 foods, but his came back with like everything that he eats pretty much. So we were confused as to why so many things came back on our tests as allergens, but the dietitian continued to explain that she thinks that this might be a sign that we have some intestinal permeability.
So about 20 minutes in, Rebecca talks about how Tim was basically eating food, but it looked like he was absorbing nothing. And again, if you're inflamed, if you've got leaky gut, if your body is like on attack internally and you're dealing with auto inflammation, like you're not going to be able to take in what you're eating. It's going to cause all kinds of issues. So we see here there's a lot there to unpack, but by and large, this poor guy is like eating a plant-based diet. It's clearly not agreeing with his body, but he's so locked into the diet that he's not willing to change it because of how it affects him.
Crave, you know, other foods like legumes and stuff like that, and I wanted to have them, that my symptoms were really bad when I did eat them. Tim was also eating the low allergen diet, except his food list was smaller than mine because he couldn't eat as many foods as I could, so that made his meals really boring, really unsatisfying. So yeah, we did that for a few months and nothing helped his symptoms. He started losing a lot of weight. It felt like he was eating and his body was absorbing nothing.
About 24 minutes in, his skin is still breaking out. You can see a picture of his skin breakout, which is absolutely insane. He's lost more weight, so he weighs less than Bonnie Rebecca, and he weighed something like 15 to 20 kilos more than Bonnie Rebecca when they first met and when he first kind of started out on the vegan journey. And they see a doctor in Sydney and they're like, your body is wasting away. Like, your gut can't physically break down the food. If you keep eating this way, you're going to be ending up in a hospital.
When I met him, he weighed 14 to 15 kilos more than me. So yes, it's really hard for me to even try to put into words like what he was going through. Because talking about it like this, like, it just doesn't really do it justice how much he suffered over the last 4 years. And yeah, things were bad. That's really the only way to put it. We couldn't wait to go see the doctors to do something about it. So long story short, we ended up seeing another doctor in Sydney. So he went to this doctor, he told her that he's going to get these tests done in a few months' time and he needs something to hold him over in the meantime. And she pretty much said to him, look, I know you've been vegan for a really long time, but right now what you're eating, your gut cannot physically break down and extract nutrients from. You're not getting any nutrients, you're not getting calories, you are fading away.
So 25 minutes in, they add in eggs, fish, and within 5 days, this guy's symptoms clear up.
And you have to change your diet, otherwise you're going to end up in hospital. So the first thing he started eating was some fish and eggs. He had fish twice a day for lunch and dinner and eggs for breakfast. And within about 5 days, all of his symptoms had cleared. Yeah, trying to wrap my head around that.
And they're devastated. Obviously, their belief in the vegan diet and the plant-based diet was so strong, and yet they shift and add in animal foods, get some fish oil, some omega 3s, and their whole perspective is shifted.
We finally went to our doctor's appointment 4 months later. I felt so comfortable with my doctor. I felt like he really understood my background and my history. He had lots of people coming from similar backgrounds, and then also so much knowledge about autoimmune diseases and understanding my dad's situation, and also about plant-based diets. So I felt like I was in really safe hands, and I actually finally felt like I could breathe and not try and fix it myself, because all this time I've like been listening to doctors that I'm like talking with, but also doing my own research and also trying to figure out what the best way to go about it is. And although I think that can be a good thing, like, trying to figure out things yourself, I just felt so exhausted from doing that. So he ran a whole bunch of tests on us, and I'm not going to go into too much detail into those because it's extremely hard to read them, and unless you're a professional, very hard to kind of break them down. But I'm going to give you an overview of what he kind of found, and that was, for me, a bacterial imbalance in my gut, a really big imbalance with my omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, an imbalance in my cortisol levels, and the main thing that he was concerned about, which was very high inflammatory markers.
So here again, we see at about 27.5 minutes in, the doctor specialist they're working with, of course your omega-3, omega-6 ratio is gonna be out of balance. You're eating plant fats. Like, these are omega-6, they're inflammatory to humans. I hate to be the one who's like harping on this, but again, omega-3s are going to reduce inflammation for the most part. Omega-6s are gonna support inflammation. And you need a balance of both. You need both. And you can get both from animal foods. But when you eat an all plant-based diet, the amount of omega-3s that you get is substantially reduced.
Chronic inflammation can lead to, things like autoimmune diseases. So it's really important to get that under wrap. His protocol to help those things that he was mainly concerned about, which was the inflammation, the bacterial imbalance, is to change my diet. And there was quite a few different changes in the diet, but one of them included adding in fish and eggs. All this time, I was always thinking when a doctor would recommend, eating more protein or something, I would always think plant food has plenty of protein in it. There's nothing in animal products that you can't get from plants. It doesn't make sense. Why would that help the situation? It turns out it's not what animal protein has, it's what it doesn't have, and that is fiber. Fiber is good for you. Fiber is really important for healthy bowel movements and a healthy gut, but there is such thing as too much fiber, and especially when you have a damaged gut or an bacterial imbalance and your body is unable to break down food properly, too much fiber can be a bad thing and it can cause inflammation.
So about 28 minutes in, she talks about how she was always thinking that plant foods have protein, that they have everything. There's nothing in animal products that you can get that you can't get in plants. But the problem is plant molecules are designed to prevent predation. Because plants can't run from their predation, they have developed natural pesticides and toxicities. They add things like phytic acid, oxalates, and even like things like fiber, which the human gut is just not big enough and designed to consume in vast amounts, can really mess up your body and your system. You're not, a big piece of this is just getting rid of things. We talked about this before in several of my videos. A big part of the carnivore diet is the fact that it's an elimination diet and it gets rid of things, and that's why it works. But still provides you with key essential nutrients, complete amino acids, protein, and fat that your body can take in, as well as the omega-3s and the DHA and EPA that you need. This is kind of an extreme example, but there are many examples if you go to YouTube where you can find people like this. And there's some doctors in the vegan community who are saying, well, there's millennials out there and they're not really following a real diet. I would venture to guess they're a little bit behind on their homework and their research. A lot of these doctors who are in the vegan community will also say you need to take supplements. And I would say it's not really a diet that's ancestrally consistent, because you shouldn't have to take supplements. Supplements are, by definition, a supplemental thing. They're not supposed to be a primary addition to your diet. If you're on a vegan diet, most people are gonna have to supplement B12. You're gonna get tons of B12 from things like shellfish, from high quality egg yolks, from even from meat. Zinc, another one, like you could go on. There are several ingredients that you're just missing on an animal diet. And again, you get nothing from plants that you can't get from animal foods. That is one thing that you will be able to state from the biochemistry. So there's no vitamins if you eat a nose to tail full carnivore diet, the way that we talk about actually doing it, where you're gonna have a deficiency. And so again, I thought these examples were pretty powerful. Two people who are were vegan or mostly vegan, who basically explained from very real anecdotal feedback what had happened in their lives following this sort of way of living, if you will, and also just adding my points about the fact that I'm not supporting factory farming. I think that the carnivore diet can be a very sustainable diet for the world. And when we look at ruminant agriculture and the greenhouse gas emissions from animals in that sort of style of farming, where there is carbon sequestered in the soil and plants are growing out of that and the animals are eating those plants and that cycle is there, there's actually a lot of evidence to support that this is the way that kind of the world evolves, probably before we even had our farming methods. And really these plant molecules, again, as carnivores, are what have been really triggering a lot of us. So if you made it this far, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Again, if you're vegan, I'm not trying to knock it. I think that for some people it can work well, but I really do believe that the carnivore diet is an optimal way of eating. Lower in inflammation, it's going to, for a lot of people, and here are two specific examples, going to give you much better sources of omega-3s, DHA, EPA for your brain. It's going to deal much better with your gut issues. Personally, I can testify to how well my gut has felt since removing coffee, avocados, kale, spinach, some of the superfoods that are touted, and just overall my vitality and mental clarity. So I appreciate you all. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, shoot me a comment. Let me know what your experience is like on the carnivore diet. Have you been a carnivore for a month, 6 months, a year? Were you a vegan in the past? And as always, keep crushing. We'll see you in the next video.